When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Battle of Blackwater. Again, this is a video that on the surface, you clicked on it and might be thinking, oh, this is just a large chapter analysis like some of my other videos. It is, but it isn't, because I'm not exactly like looking at every single page and going on what's in people's heads. It's kind of looking at, if I was a historian looking down on the actual battle, what's going on, why this happens, why that happens, kind of the factors that lead into both sides, and all of the events surrounding it. As a lot of you guys may know, this is one of my favorite parts of all of A Song of Ice and Fire, and so we're going to take a deep dive into it. Also, if you guys are new here and you want to learn more about A Song of Ice and Fire, consider subscribing, and let's get into the video. So, I wanted to start out by kind of setting the stage for the battle, like talking about what are the pros and cons for both sides, what are they working with, what does their militaries look like, what are their military strategies looking like. And so let's start off with Stannis, given that he is the invading force. At this time, Stannis is coming up from the south of Westeros. Again, he has been in the Stormlands, notably at Storm's End, and at this point, Renly has been mysteriously killed. The circumstances are different when you talk to this person or that person. Some people think Catelyn did it, some people think Brienne did it, some people believe this rumor that a shadow of Stannis killed him. So we're kind of all over there we're all over the place when it comes to that. But the point of it is to understand that most of Renly's men, specifically the Stormlanders, some of the Reachmen do as well, just not a lot of the major ones, right? Notably the Tarleys, notably the Tyrells, a lot of those bigger houses in the Reach do not support Stannis. So at this point, you have to remember that Stannis's men are not exactly the most loyal to him, right? They went over to Stannis as basically like the second choice, right? Is one of those things that's going to be to a detriment to Stannis. It is something to remember, right? But at this point, let's actually look at his fleet and his men. At this point, he has about 200 ships with about 4,600 men. Again, some of these ships are more like, yes, let's destroy Joffrey's fleet, while other ships are just packed with extra men to land them on the beach to, again, establish a position on the beach so that while they're ferrying over Stannis' men from the south end of the Blackwater to get to the north and transport all those men to get to the gates and to actually siege and take King's Landing. So, again, you have a variation fleet when it comes to these ships, but along with that, we have approximately 16,000 men coming up from the south with Stannis himself. Something very different from the show, because the show really had it where all of Stannis' men were basically on these ships, or so it appeared, and Stannis himself was leading the attack on the ships. That is not the case in the book at all. Stannis is more like a Tywin-esque, where he kind of commands from the back. And so that's kind of what we're set up here with the Stannis camp, right? Moving into the fleet, going through the open sea or the water, is his fleet with, again, 200 warships and about 4,600 men. The rest of his men are on foot. So you total this all up, and Stannis has just over, it would appear, about 20,000 men. So let's think about this from Tyrion's point of view as well. Tyrion knows, again, that most of this fleet will be coming to the Blackwater Bay. He also knows of the approaching army on land as he sends his clansmen to harass them. Now, this is important, right? Because the clansmen are basically supposed to do what they did in the Vale, right? They're supposed to take out any scouts, any forces that they can pick off, just annoy Stannis' forces, right? Keep them on edge. Don't let them sleep. Don't let them feel comfortable in this siege, in their preparation. Take out any of their scouting ability. And that's key as well. So we've already talked about two major things that are going to go against Stannis. What we see with, say, for Robb's camp, one of the biggest things that he is able to do is he's able to scout and also basically eliminate anyone from seeing his movements. It's one of the biggest reasons he catches Jaime Lannister off guard. So taking away Stannis' vision is pretty important. Now, again, with that being in mind, Stannis at this point, I'd have to believe, doesn't think it's that big of a deal, given the fact that the last time we hear of Tywin is he's at Harrenhal, but he's also trying to get to the west. News would not have reached the south yet at this point that Tywin failed, right? So that's important to understand as well. Like, Stannis does not know the movements of these other armies. So that's key to understand. So even without these scouts, all the men trying to basically get any type of information, at this point, I think Stannis believes he's going to be able to take the city very quickly anyway. But Tyrion also notes that they'll probably assault the Mud Gate, as it is the least defensible gate that they have, and it also has good access for his fleet to get close to the gate. Again, if you are Stannis's men, and you are the fleet, you want to get as close as you can to the gates, as far up on the beach as you can, because it allows you a better chance to get your men from point A to point B, being the gate or the walls. Because the more open terrain you have there, the easier time you're going to see archers being able to get multiple shots off before you can get to the actual gate and walls. So this all makes sense. Tyrion completely understands and guesses what happens. Now, when we do see this battle play out, we know this isn't the only gate they go for, but Tyrion is mainly correct, right? This is where the hammer is going to hit. And so Tyrion, noting this, is going to do what I just said, right? You can't have anything on this beach to make it to where they can hide, they have protection, they can get on top of some of the buildings or makeshift stuff outside the walls to try and then climb the walls. So what does Tyrion do? He basically has Bronn burn all of these buildings, all these like shops that are outside the wall, make it barren, right? Make them have to go under hellfire to get to the wall. And so all of this is really smart, right? He makes all these people either move inside the castle or leave, right? They cannot be here when Stannis gets here. And again, I want to point out a comparison. Think about D-Day in World War II. When those soldiers were getting onto the beaches of Normandy, there was no cover, right? The cover was you're either getting in a divot, you're getting behind maybe some little part of the barbed wire to where you can't be shot. You were basically screwed, right? I mean, I think the comparison is very similar here. Now, it's different because, again, World War II, you have machine guns, things like that can just kill men very quickly. Bows and crossbows, very different, but still, the point is kind of the same, right? Tyrion is trying to make it as difficult as possible. Now, and again, another thing that Tyrion is planning on is, again, he wants to force them to try and use rams and ladders. He doesn't want their defenses to just be broken because people are climbing on these makeshift roofs and then climbing on top of the wall, because Tyrion notes they have less men, right? Stannis has about double, a little over double of Tyrion's men. So again, you're going to need to make sure you make it as difficult as possible. Another thing I kind of want to look at here, I hinted at this already, but I want to look at the loyalties of both armies, right? Because in my opinion, this is one of those weird battles where you have two armies that almost have zero loyalty. Now, Stannis I would say, is a bit more loyal army because part of it is, some of the men that were with him at Dragonstone to begin with, but a vast majority of his army didn't proclaim him king until Renly was dead. So that's very interesting to start off, because the reason I bring this up is if the battle starts to go badly, if there is a chance where it seems like Stannis could lose, those men could flip on him very quickly. But what is very interesting is, like, Tyrion is in the exact same predicament, if not worse. His army is mainly sellswords and gold cloaks with bad loyalties as well. We know that Cersei put a lot of men in the gold cloaks, and they don't really seem like the best type of men, right? So again, in like a lot of historical battles, if one of the sides appears to be losing, you could see a lot of those men flip sides. But this begs the question, right? I haven't really talked about how many men Tyrion really has. And we're told he has about 7,000 to 8,000 men garrisoning the castle, containing about 5,700 gold cloaks, again, of which only about 2,000 are actually trained warriors. Again, those are some of the men that Robert put in, and they've had a lot of training, they've been in the gold cloaks for a while. And then Cersei put in the rest, and they are not really great. They're more green or looking for meals. Again, think about if you're a common soldier, or think about if you're a common poor person, right? If you can show any type of skill with any type of arms, or maybe you're just strong, or you look, you know, just like you could fight, this is a pretty good deal for you. You at least get some food, right? Now, Tyrion also has about 800 sellswords from Bronn, another 300 knights, and about 150 mountain clans that has been sent out to harass Stannis. Again, think about most of Tyrion's army, right? Most of it are men that are either being paid to be there, or they're men that have very mixed loyalties. So, again, you can see why Tyrion is very worried about this, and Tyrion winning this battle is very low, because as soon as they reach the gates, right? If they reach the gates, this battle's over. That's more or less the way it kind of seems from the outlook before the battle actually starts. Even in terms of the fleet, Tyrion is outmatched, right? Tyrion only has about 57 real ships for battle, and he has a bit more when it comes to barges and skiffs, but those are loaded with wildfire. So if we're looking at a straight fight here, I mean, Tyrion is outmatched like 4-1. When we're talking about actual warships, if you even want to go 5-1, it doesn't look good, right? Everything points to Tyrion losing this battle. And so that begs a question, like, what does Tyrion really have? So Tyrion does have 3 massive trebuchets to challenge Stannis' fleet, challenge his men getting to the beachheads. So again, that's part of it, right? A defender's advantage having those siege machines. But outside of that, he has this chain that he's been building. And again, us, the audience, we don't know exactly how that's going to be used. We don't know exactly what Tyrion's plan is at this point, but we know that there are things in place that Tyrion is going to attempt to do some sort of trickery. We know the wildfire is going to be a part of that, and we also know that the chain will be a part of that. But something else I find interesting that Tyrion does to try to balance out the scales is Tyrion is someone that, again, we're going to see in his speech, he uses these people and saying, you know, this is your home. But not only that, before the battle starts, he actually is very clever and uses religion against Stannis. Another thing we've talked about that's been a big falling point for Stannis. Stannis taking the Red God is very different in Westeros. That's unheard of, especially for a major lord. And so Stannis, in a lot of ways, isolates a lot of allies doing that, right? He puts a red X on himself for a lot of the common people. And so he gets the High Septon, who, again, he is placed there. It's a big worry that Cersei has, and tells him more or less to tell them that Stannis plans to burn Baelor's Sept. And that's a huge point. Think about what we're going to see in Book 4. People are really up in arms about religion and things like that. You threatening to burn down the most sacred religious part of the city, that's going to motivate a lot of people. And so that's a really smart idea from Tyrion to kind of flip that onto Stannis. So we see that Tyrion in a lot of ways is outsmarting Stannis, which is interesting. And it doesn't even seem like a lot of it's like militarily. It just seems like he is very aware of how to motivate people, how to motivate his men, and also, again, using a clever plan when all odds seem to be against him. Again, we do need to note how much wildfire that he actually has. Tyrion, before the battle, has 13,000 jars of wildfire ready to go from the pyromancers. I also wanted to note, again, 300 of this is actually found from the dragon pit from the Mad King Aerys' reign. So, again, I talked about this already, but we do have the forming of a plan with Tyrion using the chain that has been put at the mouth of the Blackwater, which 2 new towers have been put up to basically make this work. But we also have that the wildfire will be used in the naval combat. So there's 2 other points I want to bring up before we get into the naval battle and the starting of the Battle of the Blackwater. Littlefinger has been sent to make an alliance with the Tyrells at Bitterbridge to make an alliance. Very significant, right? Tyrion at this point doesn't know what's going to come from that. That's almost a shot in the dark at this point, given how poor the situation is going for the Lannisters, right? The Tyrells, they have to basically agree to this very quickly, amass their army very quickly, and come south. Because this alliance does not work if King's Landing is already taken. So a lot is riding on Littlefinger, and Littlefinger is not a very trustworthy individual to begin with. So it is something where, yes, it's there, but it's something probably not in the it's probably something not in the back of Tyrion's mind at this point. But it is something relevant, as we'll see how the battle plays out. But at this, Tywin has also been delayed from entering the west because of Edmure's defense of the Riverlands, allowing him to get news of the assault on King's Landing. Again, if Tywin was able to go west, if Edmure had not stopped him, again, not on Edmure, completely on Robb, this wouldn't have happened, right? Because Tywin's army now is in a very interesting position. Tywin is going to be basically forced to kind of retreat. And so the question here is, the Riverlands and the capital are not very far away, right? Like going from a Harrenhal, that area, to King's Landing is not that far. What is going to come from this is like Tywin's able to get aid and send it back very quickly. That's two relevant things that we need to discuss before actually getting into the battle. And again, this is what I want to say, again, why I find this battle so fascinating. This video is already 15, 16 minutes long. We haven't even talked about the battle yet. This is all prelude because there's so many factors going into everything. And so, yeah, it's time to get into the battle, and let's get into Davos's POV when assaulting King's Landing. So, getting into the actual battle, let's start with the Navy. It's the most important part. This is going to be the part where that really leads into everything. And so let's talk about it. So the naval assault begins as the command of the Navy for Stannis has been given to Emery Florent. He has them into battle lines of 10, each commanding 20 ships respectively. The Royal Navy makes up the first 3 lines, and Emery has also made Sandor San's ship stay as the rear guard out in the bay. Again, this is a important thing, right? You don't want to get flanked, so this is kind of your rear guard. Also, Emery just doesn't really trust them and all of that, but it's very important here as well because they can also be used to transport some of Stannis's men from the South Bank to the North Bank and to attack the city. So again, all of that is relevant to keep in mind as we go forward in this. But the plan is for the slower ships to transport Stannis's forces across the river to begin the attack. And Emery is someone that is very confident. And this is the thing, you can't blame Emery, right? I think given any military strategist, this seems like a surefire win, right? Everything we just talked about seems like it's leaning to Stannis. His fleet is bigger. You have one of the best military commanders in Stannis. You have more men by a lot. The only disadvantage you have that they know of right now is that they are the attacking force. But as Stannis' navy reaches visual sight of King's Landing by the afternoon, Emery takes no precaution, and the fleet rushes into the Blackwater rush. Again, what we could have seen differently that maybe could have helped is if they would have sent out scout ships, right? Send some ships ahead. It's the same idea that we talked about with Robb, like sending riders out to basically show what's in front of them, show movements around them. Emery doesn't take this precaution. And again, I can't exactly blame him, but it definitely could have helped. But at this, we see the fleet rush into the Blackwater rush, again, narrowing the room they have to work, which is an advantage for Joffrey's fleet. Again, if you have all of these ships, you can't use your numbers because of the shrinking, the shrinking bay, right? You can't encircle them. And so that is an advantage for Joffrey's fleet, but for Tyrion specifically, because you're going to have all these ships in a very tight quarters. And if you're using wildfire, if you're using this chain, there's going to be nowhere to escape. You're not going to be able to get your ship out of this. And that's the point for Tyrion. And this is all something that Emery doesn't really seem to get, as he thinks he can just brute force through them, which in any situation which wildfire wasn't part of it, he would be right. But as they enter the rush, Davos notices that there are 2 new towers that have been put up on either side of the rush. And this is the other part of, like, Davos even realizes the chain, like he can see it in the water. The problem is they're moving way too quickly to really even think about it, right? You're going into battle, right? It's too kind of almost late to figure this out. If you had sent people forward to go, oh, okay, wait, there's these 2 towers. There seems like there could be something in the water. This could be a trap. And in this scenario, if that was the case, you would have probably sent men to take the towers and then you would have been fine. So again, Tyrion is playing on the idea that they're not going to do that. And he's completely right. They are not, they want to brute force this. They're not going to worry about those things. So the fleet continues to go by the trap. Davos notes the small fleet that has included their smaller ships that Davos finds odd to be here. Again, when you see all these smaller ships that are not warships that we talked about earlier, it is quite weird. Like, if you're thinking about this from Davos's point of view, they have the numbers. It almost seems like they're just bolstering it to bolster it. But again, we know that this is really just to add stuff in the way, right? So ships can't get through, creating a blockade so the wildfire will take them all. But I want to point out, Imry is not an idiot, right? Imry knew that they should be on high alert for wildfire. I think the difference here is I don't think Imry would have thought they would have had as much wildfire as they did. And I also don't think he thought they would have implemented it the way they did. Tyrion is just very smart in the way he did it. So again, these ships were put on alert for it. It wasn't like this was out of nowhere. It's just the way it happens and the trap that is sprung is so clever that you can't really expect that. But as the fighting begins, the ships begin to clash, and Stannis' fleet is at this point destroying Joffrey. Some ships at this point have even made it past this blockade and have started landing men on the beach, to which the Hound is there to meet them. And we'll talk about the Hound later on as we get there with Tyrion's kind of stuff going on. But this is significant, right? Already men are starting to land, and the biggest part that Tyrion wanted to avoid was men landing in the first place. So already in this battle so far, Stannis is winning, but this is where some things are going to change up. But at this moment, we see Davos noticing the ship Swordfish, heading straight for a boat oozing with wildfire. They smash into it, and wildfire explodes everywhere. The battlefield is turned into a hell. Fire is consuming all within the entanglement. At this very moment, Davos notices the trap. The Great Chain has been lifted to block their escape. And can you imagine this scene, right? You have all of these ships that are intertwined. Again, tight space, you can't really back up. You're all messed up. There's no moving away from this, right? And even if you can, let's say you even are able to get your boat out of this, there's nowhere to go, right? You're either going to the North Bank, the South Bank, if you can even make it, or you're going straight. There's no going back. And so that's really important for Tyrion. He has blocked a retreat. He has made Stannis have to go all in for this. They can't test the defenses. We've seen that kind of in warfare and combat to test a person's defenses. There's none of that. And so this is huge because it takes out a vast majority of Stannis' fleet, right? Now, as we'll kind of learn in Tyrion's POV, it doesn't exactly take out his entire fleet, but it does do a pretty good job. And as we even see this from Tyrion's eyes, Tyrion notes that he can tell, even after all of this, it would not be enough, right? Even after this huge, smart plan, taking out a good portion of Stannis' fleet, 8 ships had landed men. That's significant, right? So 8 men have already begun kind of the sieging and trying to get to the gate, while another 30 or 40 have made it to the banks. Again, if you put all of that combined, that's also still not even, when you think about Stannis' reserve or rear guard, in Salador's force, he still has a larger fleet number than what Joffrey had originally. So I think that's still relevant, even though Tyrion does kill a lot of the fleet. He still has ships to get his men to the south, to get his men to the North Bank, and to start sieging the castle. And at this, we also note that hundreds of men are making it ashore, bringing a ram to bring down the king's gate. And Tyrion again tries to go and reinforce the gate, but by the time the Tyrion has reached the gate, he can hear them breaking down the gate. And this basically signals the end. Stannis' men have made it to the gate. They've broken, it seems like, the beach defense, and things are not going well, right? Stannis' men have established a footing on the beach. It's going to allow them to transport more men to the beach. This is bad, very bad for Tyrion's situation. But as we see this going down, he commands the Hound to repel them, but he has had enough. And Tyrion notes how broken the Hound is. And so the Hound notes, again, in this, what we talked about a little bit earlier on in this battle where the Hound was taking on the forces that were landing, the Hound has lost half of his men defending that beach. Half. That's a very significant amount. The morale is at an all-time low. It seems like Stannis has won. And at this point, Tyrion knows he must lead the battle. Who else is going to do it? Joffrey's not going to do it. The Hound, the person that you thought was going to do it, he's not going to do it. So Tyrion knows that he must step up. At this, he does his speech. At first, he shames them, again saying that, you know, if I'm willing to fight, what does that make you guys? Tells them that this is their city to fight for, and beckons them towards the Sally port. Again, he's basically using, Stannis is going to take all your stuff. So fight for your stuff. Don't fight for the king and don't fight for all these things. Fight for you and things that belong to you, your wives, your children, whatever. We also find out in Sansa's POV that while the King's Gate was being rammed, the Mud Gate was also under attack as well. So again, it's not even just a one-pronged attack. There are multiple gates now being sieged. It would appear that the end is coming, but we'll see how Tyrion's attack goes as well. And at this point also that Joffrey was now being brought back to the castle. And again, if you are a common soldier and you see the king is fleeing the battle, what would you do? Right? You see this guy that's asking you to die for him, and yet he's not even willing to be here. He's leaving. He's going to the protection of Maegor's Holdfast. Like, it's just another thing that is another blow to morale. And again, at this point in the battle, it just seems very clear that Stannis is about to win. But at this, we go back to Tyrion. Tyrion notes that 3 ships have landed in the tourney ground, with a 4th further out shooting burning pitch at the city. Tyrion leading his men, who most were mounted, come from the side of the men besieging the King's Gate. Again, Tyrion has all the advantage here. These men did not expect to be attacked, especially in melee from the side. Also, they're focused on breaking the gate, while also Tyrion's men are also mounted. So again, all the advantage goes to Tyrion's charge. And we also note that Tyrion's charge sends them running and the ramming stops. So for now, Tyrion has saved the King's Gate. But all around the waterfront, men were fighting. But Tyrion says they will ride to the Mud Gate to relieve it as well. But on the way, they are interrupted with more fighting. As they continue riding, only a handful of men still follow Tyrion to the Mud Gate. Again, there's just warfare everywhere. Yes, they have repelled the men from attacking the gate, but that doesn't mean there's men all around, right? There are men constantly getting to this beach. And so even though this trap has been sprung and it's slowed down Stannis' men, it's not going to prevent them from getting here. It really just bought them more time, if anything. And so Tyrion and a small group of men then get to the Mud Gate. And at this, Tyrion finally runs into Balon Swan, who notes that 20 or so galleons have been tied together, creating a bridge for Stannis' boldest men to cross. Again, it a little bit shows the desperation, but it also shows the eagerness for a lot of Stannis' men to win the battle, right? It appears like they're about to win, right? They've gotten a good foothold on the beach, it would appear. Were sieging the gates. And so it seems like one last attack will break their backs. The battle then rages on, but it seemed to be going poorly as they were outnumbered. Eventually, Tyrion's horse is injured and killed. Eventually more seems to turn on Tyrion, but is saved by Podrick. But Tyrion passes out as the ship bridge eventually falls apart. So again, all of this is interesting because you have this almost ship bridge, right? Because they're having issues with getting men from one side of the river to the other, or one side of the bay to the other, because again, there's just a massive clump of ships everywhere. So what do Stannis' men do? They decide, hey, let's just go over these ships and let's do it that way. Now, this works for a decent amount, right? They, for the most part, take out the Lannister defense, right? Tyrion is leading the last part of the defense. If this fails, the battle's over. And in Stannis' eyes, Stannis' men, this should be over, right? They've lost all morale. The last leadership that they had is been basically defeated. He's not dead, but he's been defeated. And at this point, we go to Sansa's POV to kind of wrap up everything that happens. At this time, Lancel notes that hundreds of the gold cloaks are throwing down their weapons. After watching Joffrey flee the battle, he concludes that the battle is lost. And this is a reasonable decision, right? When you see Tyrion and his forces are basically failing at this point, they're falling. There's this land bridge or bridge over the bay. Stannis' men are reaching the beach even more and continuing to hammer at the gates. The men are losing all faith and morale because Joffrey is gone and their other leader seems to be dead at this point. Everything has gone completely wrong. But there is something suspicious going on as well, as Osney Kettleblack adds that there seems to be fighting on both sides of the river, which seems very odd, right? Because why would that be? Yes, there are clansmen on the south bank, but there's only 150 of them. Is that really enough to have a battle? So that already begs a question, what's going on? Right, Osney concludes that maybe some of Stannis' men have turned on him, but that doesn't seem very logical given the information we know, because Stannis is on the edge of winning. Why would they turn coat now? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. But either way, the ramming of the gate is continuing, as the water side have been lost to Stannis' forces. But at this, we learn that this is not the case. While all this was going on, because of the delay that Tyrion had for Stannis' forces crossing to get to the gate, Tywin and Mace Tyrell come upon the north bank and hit Stannis in the rear. His forces scattered, destroyed, or turning their cloak. The attack was said to be led by Renly's ghost, but as we know, it was Loras and Renly's armor. Now, this is interesting right away because, for one, Tywin and the Tyrells have more men already, so they already outnumber them, but it's a surprise attack. Stannis, again, the problem of he didn't have any vision, he didn't know about this attack at all. But you also have the idea that Stannis' forces are actually quite separated at this point, given some of them are trying to siege, some of them are still trying to cross, some of them are still on the south bank, whatever. At this point, it's kind of over. And you also think about the idea that a lot of these men truly liked Renly and respected him, enough so that they went to him before Stannis. And so that's enough for them to turn, right? To turn on Stannis' men and to pledge their allegiance to the Lannisters. But also just think about it like this. When you see the Lannisters and this ghost of Renly pop up, you kind of realize the battle's over. You're screwed. You see this mounted army, another army, after you've already seen the atrocities, what's happening. Think about the effects that seeing your entire fleet basically just get destroyed. Think about how psychologically damaging that can be. Watching your friends or fellow men burn alive in this trap that's been set by Tyrion. And it all comes to this end in which the Lannisters win and the Baratheons lose. So again, I want to thank you guys for watching. This is a video that I've been working on very hard for the last week or two. So I appreciate all the support on this video because I know you guys always do. And yeah, I hope you guys all liked the video. If you guys have anything else you want to add to the video, let me know down in the comments. If you guys think I should do some other type of battle, because I did like analyzing this battle as a whole. And yeah, I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.